Hi, welcome in. So happy to be here with you as always, finding ways to continue sharing this practice that I hold so dear. We will be practicing yin style today and doing this or capitalizing on this moment of meditation and shapes to really focus on that inward turn. So we're going to be pretty low, pretty turned inward. You're definitely going to want the props and tools that you have available to you. Um, some pillows would be great. Blanket would be stellar. If you've got books or blocks, awesome. Um, as always, you're welcomed and encouraged to modify the practice in the way that fits best for you. So you might want to pause to get settled. When you're ready, I will meet you on the mat and we'll get started. So we won't take too long here to settle in since the practice of yin gives us all this wonderful open space to really settle. The whole practice is about settling in and turning in, wandering inward, as is our intention today. But I do like to always take a moment to land so you can go ahead and settle into a seat. And of course, if it's safe, close your eyes. Otherwise, eyes land on an unmoving point. Mm. It'll work to steady your breath. It doesn't need to look any particular way, simply noticing if there's jagged edges or if it's rushed or if there's pauses. Can you simply invite yourself to drop into something that is smooth and steady, whatever that looks like for you? In today's practice, I encourage you to use this quiet space of practice to explore what is in that space just below the surface of you. And what if we allowed ourselves to dwell in that inner world for just a moment, listening to your own heart's tides, dropping into the space at the center of your life? I'll be sharing some bits of writing from Tracy Shaw in the practice today. And we'll get the entire piece at the end. And in case any words seem familiar, and we'll give you the whole piece at the end of the practice. So noticing that sensation of emptying and filling, filling and emptying as your breath moves through you in that inner space. And let's go ahead and take that willingness to explore, step into the inward way, into our first shape for today's practice. So if you have your hips elevated, as I do, you can set any cushion or pillow off to the side, roll up and over feet and ankles or slide them around behind you. And we'll start in a twisted tadpole this morning. So I'm actually going to demo this facing toward you so you can see what's happening in the upper body. So I'll take my knees out quite wide. My big toes are touching at the back. If this isn't working for ankles, knees, hips, you can always take a block underneath sits bones or a couple blocks and prop yourself up and give yourself a little bit more space. Okay, so walking the fingertips forward as in a child's pose or tadpole, you have two options here. Depends how your shoulders are feeling today. One is to walk both hands all the way over toward the right edge, maybe off the right edge of your mat, and settle in there. Right. So that's option A, looking for lots of length up the right side body. Option B is to actually thread your left arm underneath your right. The right arm stays long. So it's a little bit of like a threading the needle expression in the upper body. So those are your two options. We'll settle here for several minutes once you land. So it's here or here. You might even try both of those on and see which one you're feeling. There's quite a different impact for upper body depending on which one you choose. Take a few breaths to settle and resettle. And then see if you can drop into a spot that feels like a good place to land for this practice of wandering inward. I'm going to have my head up so that you can all hear me. So the mic is picking up my sound, but you're certainly welcome to encourage to stay with your head down and neck soft into the posture, into the form. And once again, this is always a wonderful anchor. You might simply observe that filling and emptying and filling your inner world with your breath. You know, our mind often, when it's in the process of wandering, is wandering in the external world. It's catching sounds, it's thinking about to-do lists, it's ruminating about events that have happened elsewhere in another time. And so this practice really gives us the gift of taking that wandering, which we all do, our minds all do that, but turning that wandering inward. This is one of the beautiful, beautiful gifts of this slow and steady practice. And we'll be here just about 1 minute more. If there's anything you might like to shift or adjust. And then go ahead and invite yourself into 3 final unhurried rounds of breath. Slowly start to rise up. If you're in that thread the needle variation, you can unwind very carefully, very lovingly. Walk your hands back towards center. If between sides, ankles, knees, or hips need a little break, you might lean your weight forward. You might tap your feet and ankles behind you. Take the time that you need. When you feel settled and ready, remember it's toes toward one another at midline, knees wide, as in tadpole. We won't do the full frog today, unless, of course, you want that. And then we'll start to walk over toward the left side of the mat. So again, it's here, twisted tadpole, more foundational variation. If you'd like to add in that version with the thread the needle in there, it's right arm underneath left this time. Remember to allow your left elbow, if you're in the threading variation, to land back down onto the earth. And take the time you need to settle in there. We'll be here for 3 full still minutes. It's better to take several breaths at the start of the pose and take the time you need to really, do the engineering of the shape, get the architecture down so that you can truly land there in a place of stillness and silence that feels peaceful rather than agitating or aggravating. That is certainly something that can come up during this style of practice. So if you notice that, allow yourself grace and remember to breathe. That is certainly something worth wandering inward on, checking out your system's responses and reactions to slowing down, to looking in. to getting more intimate with yourself in this way, in this path of silence. Folding into yourself for just over a minute more. And invite yourself into those final three breaths, always without hurry, always with the maximum focus on staying present, watching the emptying, the filling. And then go ahead and start to walk your hands, unthreading if you're in that threaded variation, back towards center. And this time, everyone go ahead and slide your hands in toward your kneecaps. You can help wiggle your knees back towards center. Slow transition, take some taps onto the tops of your feet. And then tuck your toes under, take a few taps like that, light taps. And a few pulses back. We're not going into anything too active or open here, but 6-7 minutes with the toes tucked under can feel like a lot for ankles, knees, and hips. So just some slow reinitiation of the chi back into those areas. And then the next time you drop your weight back, go ahead and fold your heels toward the floor as in downward facing dog. Take a slow walk up toward the top edge of your mat. And without even lifting your upper body, you can take a look for your blocks, or even if you've got a bolster, you could even make a little bridge tower there. I'll show you several variations. Dangling is where we're heading next. So if you have a variation you know and love, head right toward it. So it could look like this, right? Resting elbows and even forehead onto a bolster. It could be onto blocks. It could be here. I know, so many options, right? Yin is like, with that functional approach, it's like option city, right? Dangling could also look like this. Your hands could come to your thighs, and you can simply open the crown of your head toward the earth, particularly if you're not feeling super stable, proprioceptive stuff, vertigo stuff, anything that might be going on. Keep it here. And feet could even be wider as well, if that helps for you to find stability. So we're in an inversion, which there are not too many in the yin practice. It's a slightly shorter hold than our typical ones. However, we are going to be here for a little longer in our journey. You might give your head a little yes or no shake if it's not landing on a bolster or a block. Soften your knees if your hamstrings are really vocal at this moment. And start to tune into those heart's tides, that ebb and flow, the womb space, inner world, wandering inward. Lots of folding inwards today. Just about a minute left here. Remember, you can soften your knees. Your torso might rest onto your thighs for some of you, or remember your hands can rest onto your thighs. And then go ahead and move into those three last breaths. And then with your inhale, if you're still bound to your elbows, go ahead and press your hands into the earth, your blocks, your bolster, or if you're at your thighs, you can take a lift up toward a half lift. And then exhale back into your fold and simply bend your knees to come down toward a seat. You can, of course, help with your hands or with a wall, with a chair, blocks, anything you've got there. Okay, so this might be equipment you want to take with you in the next few. The remainder of the poses are it's going to be like restorative-ish options, and then we'll go right directly into like quite restorative to wrap up the practice. So go ahead and take your right leg out wide. You can keep your left foot tucked in. So this is looking a little bit like our Janu Shirshasana, but the right leg is going to wing out quite a bit wider. So those familiar with dragonfly shape, this is a half dragonfly. And of course, we're forward folding again. So for some, that looks like coming right to the forearms, to the elbows, to the forehead. For others, you might want to build yourself this little tower. There's a nice way you can incorporate the bolster here. You can build a ramp, right? And hug between the blocks as well. So any and all of those options, always welcomed. Take the time, as always, set up that architecture that is perfect and most appropriate for your body. And then if you haven't already, we're working our way toward the first minute in this form. So if you haven't kind of snuggled or settled down into a still expression, see if you can land there in the next few breaths. This forward folding shape's just so wonderful for encouraging the energy of surrendering inward, surrendering to the unknown. Sometimes it's like we know so much more about the external world than we do about ourselves if we don't take that time to wander and get curious on the inside, that inward way, deepening way. Less than 1 minute remaining here. Smooth your breath. You can, in this process of enfolding, you can also remain open to whatever you may find there. And take 3 more breaths. And if you're all the way to the earth or palms are down, go ahead and flip to palms facing down. Take a slow walk up. A breath or two, and you can help your right foot to tuck on in and help your left leg to extend out long. Remember, it's wide. So versus Janu Shirshasana, that's more here from the hip. We're going to take it out nice and wide as it's a dragonfly variation. You may like the same setup. Remember, the more restorative variation might be to build that little bolster ramp, right? Hug around it. Um, Restorative just takes the edge, like the physical, well, physical, mental, emotional edge, and it kind of softens it, it lessens it. Um, a little bit more of a an appropriate practice for all, a little bit less intensity. And so if you want to dive into that, give yourself the cushions, the bolsters, all that extra love. Otherwise, if you're coming down to forearms or forehead, we're about 1 minute in already to the journey on this side. So settling into a still spot if you have not yet found it. And find a breath that feels steady. A moment to empty into yourself. Find some space to cherish those inner movements, the ebbs and the flows, your moving breath, your beating heart, even your wandering mind. So long as you're wandering in the inner world, that would be fantastic. Under 1 minute left here. Go into that mystery. 3 more breaths on the second side. And be sure your palms are down. Take a slow walk back toward a nice tall seat. You can help pull your left knee in, and then go ahead and land both feet flat to the earth before we transition to our next form. Take a little rock from side to side. And I want to I'm actually going to show from standing. This next pose is not a standing pose, but I want to show what's happening in the lower body because it might be a little bit difficult to see with me on the ground and through video. So we'll come into a Spider-Man or woman. And so we'll be resting down onto the earth, belly down, like a prone Shavasana. Um, And you can crisscross your arms overhead, or they might be in something like cactus. And so, what's happening in the lower body, we'll start with the right hip, is a lift at an angle like so. Okay. And then again, if you want this to be more restorative, there's options. You can rest if you have a soft place for your knee and ankle to land, you might land right down to the earth. You might land onto a blanket. If you want the rest of your practice to remain a little bit more yin like, meaning a little more of an edge, you can prop up and make sure there's blocks underneath knee and ankle, or even like my bolster is quite high, or you could stack blocks and bolster. So that's where we're going with this. So come on down. Well, hopefully you're still down on the mat, and it's belly down. Crisscross forearms or those cactus arms, whichever you prefer. Slide your right knee up And another thing you could do to make this a little less edgy, depending on what might be happening in hips, is to lower your knees. So it might not be quite as high as your hip, or it might even be higher, right? We just want to avoid any hard compression, like bone on bone action in the hip. And you can keep it low for something more restorative. You can start to lift the leg higher for something with more sensation. Um, I say more or less, but also all hips are different. So if you're looking for edge, you can experiment higher or lower and see which one's working better. We are about 1 minute in on this first side. So check in, edgier, more soothing, practitioner's choice. Find it. You can rest onto your left ear. We'll even it out when we move to the second side. Soften your breath. The inner gazing can be challenging principally because it's not the typical human tendency. A lot of times when we give ourselves space for the mind to wander, it just has a habit of going outward. I don't know if that's because it's the easier focus of the mind or because we spend so much of our day wandering outward, but that tends to be the habitual path. So if you're noticing your mind going there, that's okay. The fact or the act of noticing itself is such a huge triumph. So if you notice, pull yourself back. Remember, you can always come to that filling and emptying of the breath as your anchor. Less than 1 minute. 3 more breaths. You're propped up on anything, very gently remove that so you can wiggle your right leg back to land alongside your left. Maybe between sides, simply resting at neutral spine feels best. Perhaps you want to float your feet and take a little rock from side to side. And then in the next few breaths, begin your transition to the second side. So we'll start by flipping over onto the right ear and then slide up to the inseam of your left leg. So knee and ankle, you've got all those same options for a more yin-like variation, more of an edge, a more restorative style variation, a little less of an edge. You can lift the knee and ankle higher or lower, depending on what you're looking for. In the next few breaths, though, settle into a still expression if possible. Coming up on 1 minute here. So settle into your variation. Steady anchoring breath. About 1 minute to go. 3 more unhurried breaths. And then once again, if you're propped up, you can remove any supplies you might have beneath you. Start to wiggle your left leg back to land alongside your right. Same options to neutralize. It could simply be here, maybe resting on your forehead, fully neutral spine. Perhaps you float your feet and take a gentle rock from side to side without moving fast or hurrying. And then go ahead and slide your hands in under your shoulders and lift all the way back through table. You can either take a seat back onto your heels while I walk through the options, or if that's uncomfortable, certainly sneak your feet right around to the front. So there's going to be big variation available for this last form. So you will either take a shoelace if you've been taking the more yin-like path. I do recommend if you've been heading in the direction of more restorative shapes to kind of stick with that rather than going back to something a little more edgy. Just my recommendation, but you, of course, do what's best for you. If you've been taking the more yin-like variations, you can cross your right leg over your left. So many options here. I'm sure some of you know it could be like a stack of the knees. It could be more staggered. It could be something like fire log pose, so long as you're feeling sensation in outer hips. Okay. So shoelace, we'll do just the lower body. Could look like a fold forward with your head hanging out in space, perhaps chin to your thigh or kneecap. It could look like pulling in those blocks to rest your forehead on. This, of course, will be the yin variation. Restorative shoelace is going to look quite different. So those that want to take that path, grab a stack of pillows or your bolster, or you can make a little bridge of your bolster onto your blocks. And those taking the restorative, you will actually come right on down to the earth and crisscross. Right leg stays on top. Remember, it's the same option. So if crossing all the way over is like still, wow, that's a lot of edge. That feels very yin-like. Remember, it can be more of like a Sukhasana type in the lower body or a fire log type in the lower body or full crisscross, right? But the knees are resting onto support. So this option for my friends that want the more restorative variation. Another option too is it can look like resting your feet into the floor if you really want to take the edge out with a little support under your knees. If you're in the restorative variation, you can rest your arms out wide from your shoulders, take them like cactus arms, or rest your palms somewhere along your torso, your tummy, or your heart. 1 minute to go here. And a few last breaths. And so, beginning the journey out for those on the floor in the restorative variation, take a hug of your knees in. Your transition's pretty simple. Swap the crisscross and either resting knees down low, having it be more like a sukhasana, perhaps with the opposite foot on top. For those in the seated variation, the yin variation, come on up toward a tall seat and you're going to swap, of course. So left knee stacking atop this time, or the wider shoelace or the broken shoelace, right? So long as you're in an expression, for those in the yin variation where you have an edge and outer hips, then you've got it. Doesn't matter what particular version. And then start to lean your weight forward. So again, head can hang out, kind of dangle in space if you like that traction for the neck spine, for the cervical spine. If you prefer, you can rest the weight of your head onto blocks. Some prefer to keep the torso upright. So if you explored that on the first side, of course, you have the option to do that on the second side as well. Last few moments of our this here to again give yourself this gift of diving below the surface of yourself, that external piece that the external world sees. Maybe some know, but you get to do this beautiful practice of wandering in and exploring like an archaeologist of yourself, navigating, exploring, excavating. Just over a minute to go on this second side. And 3 at ease breaths, staying fully present with all that is in your inner world. And if you're in the seated variation, very slowly coming up, you can untangle your legs. If you're down on the earth, it's quite a simple transition from here. You can tangle, and maybe the bolster lands just below your knees as you transition right to Shavasana. Those in a seat, take with you anything you'd like. Of course, if anyone prefers to integrate from their practice in meditation, I always like to offer that option because different strokes for different folks, right? So perhaps landing here to the earth, hands can land into your torso or palms open upward to the sky as your arms rest alongside your ribs. If it feels safe, allowing your eyes to close as we settle in for just a few final minutes here. I'd like to share this entire piece that I've been giving snippets from throughout the practice called A Blessing for the Inward Way by Tracy Shaw. And you can just kind of let it pass through without trying to grasp at the words and trust that you'll receive anything that is meant for you. He says, may you learn to dwell below the surface of the days at home with the ebb and flow of your own heart's tides. May you find the womb space at the center of your life. There grow wise in the sacred rhythm of filling and emptying, emptying and filling. There, held safe, may you surrender to the unknown as completely as the dark moon empties herself into the secret embrace of her beloved, the sun. There, may you cherish hope of renewal as tenderly as the crescent moon cradles the dark in the curve of her arm, enfolding, quickening with life newborn. And may you always open to the flow of love as voluptuously as the moon at full, until filled, overflowing, you pour love's gifts out into the world. So may you grow ever more intimate with the inward way, the deepening way, where filling is emptying, emptying is filling, at one with the mystery, at one. And somewhere in the journey of your next 3 breaths, you can start to find very subtle shifts of movement. Of course, if you prefer a longer Shavasana, you are invited absolutely to pause and stay. Otherwise, rock your head from side to side, trace fingers, widen your toes. If seated, maybe gentle neck rolls or a nod or a rock of your head from side to side. On the earth, roll down to your favorite side so that everyone can press up to a last seat where we can seal the practice together. Landing in a seat, find a gesture that feels authentic. That's all I ask. So palms at prayer, or palms over the heart, or maybe it's hands to the earth or a bow. You might let your head rest low and send yourself in that much deserved gratitude and loving kindness for taking the time out of your day today to dedicate to self-care, to dedicate to the practice of wandering inward. And I certainly thank each of you so deeply for joining. And I will be back in practice with you all very soon. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. I'll see you next time. Bye.